Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and if you would like to stay up to date with all things Clown Decade, please do subscribe to the channel, and if you can obviously become a member. And I may as well throw this out once again right at the beginning. If you are more inclined to be a supporter of Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe than Reform as a party, this once again is not going to be the video for you, as this video is going to be going through how people who all come out the woodwork to say Farage can't make a team, Farage isn't good with other people trying to take the spotlight, Farage has no integrity, etc, etc, etc. It turns out absolutely none of these people can work together either, as we will go through. And I am of course going to be heavily critical of Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe. But we may as well get straight into this. So Ben Habib, yesterday morning, as early as even before 7 o'clock, tweeted out that my team and I have worked furiously for the last few months to establish the foundations of a political party which is capable of saving the UK and Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I'm delighted to launch that the party today, Advance UK, which if there's one thing I've seen pretty much universal agreement on, it's that that is an atrocious name. The party will stand for the entire country in all parts and for all its people. We will fight for the nation, free speech, democracy, equality before the law. We will not flinch, we will not pander to false narratives designed to damage our country. We will be for the British people and by the British people. Which does beg the question once again, if this is all reform principle as well, because they are for free speech, hence they are so behind Lucy Connolly getting out of jail, if they are for democracy, which obviously every political party in Britain is for, and if they are for equality before the law, which is why they're against two-tier care, what's the point of this? But literally, what is the point of this? The point of this is that Ben Habib did not like the direction that Reform was going, which was higher in the polls, to win elections, and instead decided to go down an ideologically pure route, which especially if electoral history is to go by, if you go down a route of being ideologically pure, especially in the first past the post system, you don't win elections. But alas, this is the route that Ben Habib has gone down, and well, I guess this is the announcement, and it feels just like he's trying to launch Reform 2.0, which is ridiculous. This is the equivalent of the McDonald's meme. This is the McDonald's at home. The party itself will be democratic. We will assemble the brightest and bravest in our college and executive. They will work tirelessly without fear or favour to formulate the policies and recruit the candidates required to fulfil our mission. If our country is to be saved, it must be saved by its people. No one person is capable of doing so. Only by assembling the best and bravest can we succeed. I mean, again, this is trying to dig at Reform and especially Farage. As if Farage hasn't been working with a team for a year at this point to become the biggest party in the United Kingdom if you look at the polling. And if you look at actual elections like the locals back in May, which I have to say I have been very smug since, and I will say I don't think that smugness is going away, because since then they've only gone up in the polls. Okay, they've had a bit of a wobble recently, but that is your standard stagnation that you would see in any poll when it comes a month after the election. Well, actually it's been 2 months, but you get the idea. It will be interesting to see who is on Ben Habib's team, because I have literally no idea. When he was doing his media rounds yesterday on the alternative media, I didn't see anyone else or hear any other names. But we will go into it, but what I do know is that Ben Habib was hoping Rupert Lowe would join the party and become leader, and that's not quite how it worked out. So it basically looks like he's made a load of promises and is putting caveats in as to have an excuse not to actually go through with this. Well, what do I mean by that? Today I'm calling for you to join our party. Our first goal is to achieve 30,000 members. We are discounting our membership fee to £10 per annum when that goal is achieved. Until that goal is achieved. When it is, we will have the required support to become a fully fledged party, because it's not actually registered with the Electoral Commission yet, and it actually can't be because its logo is a tick, and you are not allowed a tick in your logo to be registered as a political party. But as he goes on about as well, the reason he wants 30,000 members is because that's where Reform was at when Nigel Farage joined the party, and they had a massive boost in the polls and, guess what, membership numbers as well. And so Ben Habib is trying to say, if I can get to 30,000 members, that means we are equal with where we were at with Reform, which isn't the case at all, because Reform are on 14%, well, 10 to 14% in the polls, when that was happening too. And by the way, at the time they were actually going down in the polls. Anyway, when he gets to 30,000 members, Ben will donate £100,000 to the party to ensure they have the firepower to move forward. In other words, that's when he's bothering to actually register the damn thing. With your support, and only with your support, can we fulfil our mission. Please join our party at advanceduk.org.uk. Follow us on Twitter and other platforms as well. And he also had a little video with it. Let's go through the important bits quickly. Yes, Britain is in dire need of reform. I absolutely agree. Let's hear what he actually has to say.
Hello, folks. Now, some of you will know me as Ben Habib, the political commentator. Others as Ben Habib, the former deputy leader of Reform UK, as I was.
Yes, and you left in a strop. Whereas your other deputy leader, Dr. David Bull, decided to stick around and support the party, and now he's chairman again. What does that tell you? It tells you that if you actually stuck around to the party and actually trusted the plan, you'd get rewarded. That's basically it.
But today, I address you in a new capacity. I address you as the leader-in-waiting of Advance UK.
Okay, I mean, I've already commented on the name, but this emblem is what I mean. There's a tick next to it, and if you look over at the Electoral Commission's rules on their identity marks, which is what that tick is, it says we are required to consider whether an identity mark would contradict instructions or guidance for voting, e.g. tick here, or an emblem with a cross in it. And this is the rule that at least Patriotic Alternative claimed was the reason they could not register as a party, because, well, their emblem looked like a tick. Now, either Patriotic Alternative are lying, or, on the other hand, Ben Habib is going to need another emblem. Either way, it seems to be the branding that a lot of people were not expecting. But the other thing I'll say here is that Ben Habib says he is the leader in waiting for the party. I mean, one, that means that the party isn't registered, which we already knew. But two, I don't see how that's in keeping with, frankly, all his problems with what happened with reform, and with him saying that it needs to be democratic. Are you going to be voted in, or are you just going to assume the position of leader? Because that was your problem with Farage, and here you are making your own party and expecting to be leader, which isn't even unreasonable. But it is silly to do that, and at the same time complain that Farage basically owns the party and is the leader of it, if that was your problem, because that's exactly the same as what you're doing here. Because all Advance UK is at the moment is a limited company, which again was a problem he had with Farage. Yet he keeps referring to it as a party, but we'll get into more issues with Ben Habib's criticism of reform while doing the exact same thing a bit later.
So why a new political party now?
Yeah, it does genuinely seem ridiculous when the new era of politics is being bulldozed in by reform and they're averaging 30% in the polls. It actually seems like a ridiculous time to do this.
Well, the simple truth of the matter is that the United Kingdom is in deep, deep trouble. We face multiple existential threats, constitutionally, culturally, economically.
Yes, that's why Reform are doing so well.
We are on the precipice, if not over it. And none of the political parties on the British landscape at the moment offer the solutions required to save our country.
So what, do you have an entire policy platform that is giving us the answers, or is this just big chest beating because you're not allowed in any of the main parties anymore?
It is imperative, therefore, that a new political force comes into being, and that's why Advance UK is being launched. So what does Advance UK stand for? It's very simple. We stand for a proud, independent, prosperous United Kingdom.
Right, good. I'm glad you want good thing that every party says that they want. Come on, give me details. What policy is actually meaningfully different here?
And how do we get that? The first is we stand for the nation-state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Right, so like the Tories and every party to the right of them. Not meaningfully different then.
At the heart of our constitutional foundation are the Acts of Union 1800, and we will make sure that those acts are observed completely.
So the Act of Union 1800 were parallel acts of the Parliament of Great Britain and Parliament of Ireland, which united the Kingdom of Great Britain and the Kingdom of Ireland to create the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. This act came into force between 31 December 1800 and 1st January 1801, and merged the Parliament of the United Kingdom, and had its first meeting on the 22nd of January 1801. This was then repealed in its entirety when the Republic of Ireland existed. I'm not being funny, Ben. I do not think that you are going to invade Ireland to reinstate the Act of Union 1800. I think even Jacob Rees-Mogg is aware that we don't have Ireland anymore, we just have Northern Ireland.
We will stand for freedom of speech.
Yep, fine, good.
Which brings me to democracy. No country can succeed other than through democracy.
I mean, I'm not going to lie here. That's clearly and evidently not true. A much better way of arguing this is effectively, well, in Britain, some democratic principles have certainly been enforced for hundreds of years and seem to have done a relatively good job at pointing the country in the right direction. The problem, obviously, we've got at the moment, which he will probably mention, is that there's an awful lot of anti-democratic goings on, in that a lot of people have, say, been voting against immigration pretty much forever, and we only ever get more and more and more. Anyway, again, this is a fine principle. I've not got much issue with it. I just don't see how it's meaningfully different to pretty much every other party. Pretty much all of them want democracy. In fact, I'd argue the problem is that the left wing want too much democracy by effectively having votes on absolutely everything. But as I say, to be fair to him, he does say he wants to get rid of quangos and things like that. I suppose that makes him meaningfully different to the major two parties, but Reform want to get rid of the quangos too, so again, why have you made this? Oh, because you're not allowed to join Reform again, because you're left in a huff and have attacked them ever since.
So the other principle by which Advance UK will stand is the removal of international and supranational laws from our political fabric, from our constitutional fabric, the removal of all these quangos and these so-called experts, and the returning of power to Parliament.
Yep, epic music, decent speech, stuff I largely agree with, fine. Will you actually be able to make an electoral force that gets anywhere, Ben? Not exactly got high hopes for that, and I'm going to be honest with you, quite a lot of the reaction to this was basically, I think this is pointless. In fact, most of the replies were effectively, how are you different to my pet right-wing party, whether that be Reform, UKIP, even the Heritage Party, among others, and even Lawrence Fox had a big thing to say about it, but I suppose we'll wait for that. I guess we'll get into his last principle here.
And the fourth principle on which we stand, and this is essential, just as the other three are, is equality before the law. We must all be allowed to go about our daily lives not fearing that we might be subjected to a two-tier criminal justice system.
Yeah, two-tier care bad, again, a Reform point made pretty much every day. Hell, even the Conservatives make this one constantly, and they're one of the massive reasons we still have two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system.
I should also add that we won't be applying immediately to the Electoral Commission for registration as a political party. Today is really a call to you, the British people, inviting you to back us and to show your backing by joining as members.
Sorry, but again, I have to make the massive point. You cannot have a massive go at Nigel Farage saying, oh, you don't have members, you have subscribers, which became a meme, and I still see people say to this day, hell, Ben says it to this day, while at the same time trying to advertise that they will become members of your party when it's not even, and as you say, registered with the Electoral Commission. No, they are paid subscribers to your limited company yet again. For a party that's supposedly going to have a democratic process, and yet you're here telling us that you're going to be inserting yourself as leader, which again, I don't even have a problem with. What I have a problem with is the rank hypocrisy that's being blasted to Twitter, and basically everyone noticed this. It takes some brass neck to make all these complaints about Reform and then do the exact same thing yourself. I cannot tell you how embarrassing that is. Anyway, he advertises the £10 subscription fee and says he'll donate £100,000 to the party to get it registered and get it set up. Absolutely fine, I suppose, but as I say, the reaction was largely from a lot of the minor parties saying, why are you doing this? I don't see how it's any different to UKIP, Reclaim, Heritage, or even Reform. And, well, some of the leaders of these parties even came out to complain with with Lawrence Fox saying, well, the Reclaim Party, obviously Lawrence Fox said this though, was there was once a UK political party fully registered with the Electoral Commission, which was the first to recognise the criticality of free speech in a functioning democracy. I mean, let's be fair, Reform understood it as well. That party was funded by a very generous philanthropic individual who never asked anyone to share the financial load, Laurence Fox. Which, to be fair to him, that's actually true. This party spent 5 years trying to elevate free speech and cultural issues as the defining issue facing the nation, and Laurence Fox effectively just burnt every bridge possible and is seen as a massive lolcow now. So I suppose that's a massive issue with Reclaim. Such a lolcow that even Calvin Robinson moved to America to basically get away from him and do his own thing. But hey, there you go. This party one might expect that political bedfellows on the political right might have been supportive, yet this is a big issue we have. Turns out, an awful lot of people who said Farage can't make a team, Farage is a narcissist and all that, turn out they just can't work in a team themselves and don't even seem to bother to talk to each other. I mean, I will get into that over the video, but because everyone claims they've all talked to each other, but nobody is acting like they've talked to each other. To the contrary, some self-styled influential voices have approached said generous philanthropic individuals seeking money, presumably to advance their own political platform and profile. There is only one party truly fighting the battle of free speech. Yeah, that's Reform. It's been operating since 2020, actually since 2018, and we never asked you for money. Join us today, it's free, reclaimparty.co.uk. I mean, obviously a lot of that is Laurence Fox virtue signalling, look how good I am, I cared about free speech before anyone else apparently, but I also made a political party and all the money came from me. What did it lead to? Basically absolutely nothing. What's Reform led to? Everyone acting like they're the government in waiting. And for every alternate party to effectively demand the same thing, but if they demanded something just a little bit more to the right of them, let's say remigration over at Homeland, very quickly what that actually turned into was pivoting back to the Reform position, because effectively when they go out on doorstep, they get a lot of people effectively saying, you just seem like a bunch of racists. And, to give credit to Homeland, they did seem to actually want to get some sort of power, but because it turns out there's too many purity spirals over the harder right, they basically couldn't actually get the vote by being the pure, perfect remigration mass deportation party they were demanding and went absolutely nowhere. Whereas obviously Reform are trying to be an awful lot more careful about their messaging, and as I say, they are top of every poll. Anyway, needless to say, Ben Habib was doing the media rounds about this over on basically exclusively alternative media. So another thing with this is it's a test of how much influence the alternative media actually have, because I've always been incredibly sceptical of how influential it actually is. But I do want to point out this clip.
Would Nigel Farage be welcome as a member?
As a member, absolutely. He's a British citizen, last time I looked. We do have a rule that you can't be a member of another political party. And I believe he is perhaps the only member of Reform UK, true member of Reform UK, because as you know, and as viewers might know, what they call members are basically subscribers.
Yeah, I can't be bothered going through the whole clip because this argument's just really irritating me now because of the nature of the current position of Advance UK. But even if you're going on the ridiculous assumption that because he owns the limited by guarantee company, along with someone else, by the way, it's still owned with someone else. It used to be Zahir Yusuf, but now that he's not chairman anymore, it's been replaced by someone else. So it's actually still jointly owned. And I'm telling you, there is basically no member of Reform who agrees with this. Almost everyone I know in Reform feels as much a member of Reform as they did in any other political party if they were in another political party. Hell, I've got a branch meeting tomorrow. I get constant emails to help out with canvassing and leafleting. There are branch managers and regional directors, which is exactly what we had when I was in the Tory party as well, which largely is what people paid money for. They paid money into it because they believe that Reform UK is the way forward and they want to help promote the damn party, to get voters for it. Everyone I met leafleting, who was leafleting with me, I mean, was incredibly happy to be helping out, and again did not feel like they were being effectively robbed. You know, they were members of a political party, and you don't even have it registered yet, and can't register it with the current logo anyway. And I suspect that he said he won't bother to even register it as a political party until he reaches 30,000 members, as a get-out clause for not putting his money where his mouth is in the first place, which, credit to him, is what Laurence Fox did. And to be frank with you, I mean, my prediction is that it's not going to happen, but it's not actually in the realms of impossibility, because Ben Habib in clips we'll probably see later, it's quite clear that Tommy Robinson is open to join the party, and anyone is open to joining the party. You know, people can defect from Greens to go there if they want, which was another criticism of Reform, that they allow people from, like, the Lib Dems to join them. But again, that's by the by, and I would imagine that effectively he is trying to advertise to the core Tommy Robinson vote, which again I think is quite a stupid move, quite frankly, because Tommy's team is effectively in UKIP anyway. Why would they move over to Ben Habib's? I don't particularly know, but this is part of the reason that I don't think it's going to do particularly well. But my mind is open to being wrong on that. I just can't see it being particularly successful. But anyway, some would say a spanner was thrown in the works, because yesterday was a hell of a day, and I wasn't even going to bother covering the Ben Habib thing, but then 5 hours later Rupert Lowe tweeted this. Today we are launching Restore Britain, a movement for those who believe that we need to fundamentally change the way Britain is governed. We will build a policy platform together, a movement will be created together, a path will be forged together. One thing I find absolutely hilarious with all these people is they keep saying we are doing things together, and then they keep splintering. They keep splintering and splintering and splintering. We now have something like 10 parties on the right, and to be fair to Rupert Lowe, this is not a party. However, for some reason it's a policy platform, which why bother making one of them unless it is a platform that is intended for a party? I suppose the argument is it could be picked up by any party. And frankly, it goes into my thought process that Rupert Lowe's effective entire strategy at the moment is to shut out for the next 4 years and retire from politics. And I have even more reason to think that, but we'll get into that later. He makes it clear it's not a political party, but a fundamentally different way of doing things. Do you think a think tank is a different way of doing things? It's quite standard to have think tanks, because that's pretty much what this is. Think tanks are not policy platforms, they are groups that come up with researched papers to support policy, which, as we will go through, is pretty much what this is. If he said that this was another think tank, I probably wouldn't be as critical as this, but it's not exactly well advertised what this all is or what it's going to do, to be honest with you, but we'll get into that. Members from political parties are very welcome to join us on this journey if they share our values and want to be part of a bottom-up movement that has the potential to transform Britain. Again, he says people from the Green Party can go join them, and this is supposed to be explicitly right-wing. I get the principle of saying this is open to all, but let's be absolutely fair here. A massive problem we have with the right is that, well, the Tories ended up being too left-wing because Cameron opened it up to left-wingers. Margaret Thatcher's biggest issue was all the wets. I don't have all the answers. I am not a politician. Yeah, you are. What? You're an MP? You're an MEP? What do you mean you're not a politician? I find myself in Parliament, independent and isolated without a party, which again is an incredibly funny thing to say after saying I'll do all these things with you together. But strangely, during my time in politics, I never felt more part of a team. Okay, there are good, talented, dedicated people all over the country who are tired of petty Westminster politics, and now it is not the time for another political party. Take that, Ben. It is our job to bring people together, providing a vehicle that can deliver the radical restoration that is required. It was so funny when this was launched, because people who don't typically keep an eye on the online right even messaged me, effectively saying, what the hell is going on? They were literally saying, listen, I have my issues with Reform, but I'm probably just going to vote for them, effectively because what other choice do I have? But it seems that everyone who's left Reform is effectively trying to go off and do their own thing, and it seems like a massive waste of time, which has been my problem with these people since they've left the party. Your great alternative to Reform isn't even a political party, so it's not even rivaling them. It sounds like it's actually open to Reform members and MPs joining this movement, and Ben Habib's is effectively dead in the water at first light. I'm not even joking, it's basically the political party equivalent of an abortion. I'll go through it, but the man was open to saying I wanted Rupert Lowe to lead the party, but he's gone in his own direction. Again, this is helping my argument, which is, I think it's actually these people's fault who keep going off and doing their own things, trying to project their own failings onto Farage, saying Farage can't work with a team. It's clearly not true. He's worked with a pretty good team for a year, with a couple of hiccups, which you'd expect from a team that has gone from effectively a start-up to the main party in politics these days. Anyway, God, this is actually biblical. He probably got Connor Tomlinson to write this. But I need your help. Restore Britain will be built on a very different model. As a member of Restore Britain, you will have the opportunity to vote on policies and principles that you believe in. With this data, we will put pressure on the government and other political parties to recognise and act on the will of the British people. Is this effectively just pay to be a member and tell me what I should put in my next letter to the cabinet? Because that's what it feels like. Ultimately, I have no idea how this is meaningfully different to the right-wing version of this.
If we want to defeat capitalism, we are going to need a party that will organize working people to fight for the demands that we want and to win socialism. Thank you so much.
Great.
Quick point of privilege. Quick point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Guys, first of all, James Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. I just want to say, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum?
I don't need to play the whole clip, but you'll get the idea. These big what policies should we be voting for meetings, whether it's on the left or right, it just ends up turning into bickering. I've seen it myself. I was part of the Liberalists some years ago, and this is effectively what we did at that time too. Luckily you had Carl Benjamin who effectively said, oh, here's a big platform where we have these 7 principles. Can't even remember what they were, it was so long ago. But the Liberalists effectively tried to vote on the definition of each one, and it ended up being bickering, and everyone kind of had the idea of what they wanted anyway, and everyone agreed after like 2 weeks' work. Fine, but you effectively wasted time. Whereas when I was in the Wellington project, we had 5 people in a Discord call effectively going through what we meant by each principle, and people came to us, and that was actually surprisingly more successful. Obviously it's dead now because we didn't really do anything because we all have lives, but effectively this is what Reform did as well. Here's what we're all about, come join us. And it's worked out really well, hasn't it? Now, before I get the accusations of, oh, you're just an anti-low NPC and things like that, I would like to say it could work. But in my experience, it won't. Because at the end of the day, the human experience is actually relatively universal, especially within the largely same group of people, whether they are left-wing or right-wing. If you're part of the same peoples, in this case British, then, well, guess what? You are going to end up wasting a hell of a load of time and not really agreeing on absolutely everything and splitting in factions because of that. Oh, look, the right wing's already doing that all over the place. Great. Who's winning out of all of this? Farage. Who's the massive hate figure for all the right-wingers who demand absolute purity? Oh, it's Farage. Why? Because he's actually able to understand that politics an awful lot of the time is about compromise, as it turns out. And I would imagine quite a few people are going to get a rude awakening of that over the next few years, but to be honest with you, I don't think Lowe really cares, because, as I say, I think he just wants to chud out on Twitter, make his Musk bucks, and get out of there. This is also the other reason it's a paid membership scheme. He's not willing really to put his own money into this. I'm not saying he wants to make a profit out of it, directly through it. I think he's way too rich for this to be a grift. However, he is doing exactly what I think someone who was making a grift would do. I think this is much more, I need to be seen doing something, so I keep getting those Twitter likes and those Twitter attentions, because that gets me more Musk bucks. Which, to be honest with you, perfectly legitimate way to go about things. I've not even got a problem with that, and to be honest, if that's all he's doing, and if he tones down the direct attacks on Reform, I wouldn't have an issue. This can go along, and I won't say anything else. But he's still having a go at Reform, so let's not pretend that Reform MPs would be welcome here. Anyway, he goes into some initial policies, and it's basic minarchist stuff. Again, stuff that I'm quite happy with. Low tax, small state, Christian principles. A carpet bomb of cancer of wokery. Okay, that's an interesting way to put it. I agree with it. Empower individual enterprise. Good. This is the thing with Rupert Lowe. I've never particularly had a massive issue with his politics. I have an issue with the fact that he clearly is incapable of actually working with other people. Why do I keep saying that? Because he couldn't work in Reform, and now it's quite clear that he seems to have trouble working with Ben Habib. Why do I say that? Because I don't see any other reason that they would be announcing these things on the same day. Unless they both thought that a pincer movement meant doing 2 different things, which just makes them stupid, I don't see how they could have been talking at length with each other, which both of them claim that they have, but the way they've gone about all this screams to me that they didn't. Because another thing about all this is, frankly, the fact that why has he made a think tank if Ben Habib already set one up? Ben Habib a while ago set up the Great British Pack, which Carl Benjamin of the Load Seats is involved in, along with a few other people who were effectively kicked out of Reform. And look at their mission. The Great British Pack is here to deliver a truly patriotic government. We are shifting the centre of political gravity back to where it belongs. Pro-sovereign, pro-right, pro-democratic. No more socialism creeping through the back door. No more unelected bureaucrats pulling the strings. No more surrender to the globalist agenda. We're here to deliver a Britain First agenda, train our next generation of leaders on the right, draft ironclad legislation, and ensure the UK is governed by those who have its future interests at heart. How is this any different to what Rupert Lowe has just made? How, if Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe were talking at length and Lowe said, "Oh, I want to make a think tank," did Ben Habib not even mention this? I'll go through the clips in a bit, because another thing that's really weird that's happened is that every alternative media not every single one, but a lot of alternative media platform hosted Rupert Lowe and then Ben Habib right after the other, which to me also makes it seem like it's coordinated. So one of two things have happened. Either they have coordinated and made a complete mess of it, and this just looks all confusing and incredibly stupid to people, or they didn't coordinate at all, and all these attacks on Farage saying you can't work as a team or with other people can now be applied to these two, and it's all been projection. Either way, that's really bad. I'm not even joking, by the way. Here's the 2CTV example. Ben Habib was on to talk about his new patriotic party in Britain, and then a few hours later, Rupert Lowe was on to talk about his political revolution in Britain, which is obviously Restore Britain. And as we'll go through in the clips from the Dan Wootton show later, it looks like neither knew that they were both launching on the same day, which implies to me there was no coordination, and yet they both claim to have spoken at length. I don't think that's true. And if it is true, how have they messed it up this badly? It's either total incompetence with their political instincts, which I know both of them have bad political instincts, or it's total incompetence to work with anyone else. Either way, it's detrimental to actually getting anything done in politics. Anyway, where appropriate, private prosecutions will be launched, legal challenges brought, and judicial reviews funded. We will fund independent investigative journalism to root out corruption, and an FOI task force to expose government waste. A unit specifically for whistleblowers will be established to amplify their concerns. To be fair, all that stuff I'm largely on board with. It took a while, but we finally got to a place where I actually agree. Yeah, that will actually be useful. Go for it. Though I'll be honest, it is getting quite annoying seeing Rupert Lowe effectively asking for money for all these sorts of things. I get why he's doing it, but it's never actually been made clear to me how much money he puts in himself. I know Ben Habib supports both Lowe's and his own work with his own money, and that is admirable. It's never actually been made that clear to me how much of Rupert Lowe's own money he puts into it, which again is why I say, well, he has to look like he's doing things to chud out on Twitter to get the Musk bucks. Which, as I say, I can't really call it grifting. I don't really believe that he doesn't believe in what he's doing here. He just seems a little bit reluctant to put too much of his own money into these projects, which I find a little odd. But, well, there we go. 2029 is the ultimate objective, but that does not mean we cannot effect real and positive change for the next 4 years, and if we don't, there won't be a Britain to restore. Which, again, is just incredibly funny to me. When you're making a movement, these things take absolutely decades to actually turn into fruition. The Thatcher project was a neoliberalism project, which was starting all the way back with Hayek, pretty much at the post-war consensus, and then it took till the late 70s to actually get anywhere close to power. If you're saying that we basically only have 4 years to actually save the country, this is probably the last thing I'd be doing, because I'd be well aware that these sorts of movements take decades to actually get anywhere. Anyway, he finishes off, being in Parliament, I'm uniquely positioned to hold the government to account. Again, how well is that actually going in realistic terms? He sends an awful lot of letters and asks an awful lot of questions. Where does it ultimately get him? His main push recently has been for the whole changes to halal slaughter, which honestly, from my perspective, he's not done a great job on. He brings it up in Parliament and it really doesn't go far beyond that. There's a select committee who talks about it with him and they have a back and forth debate. Never particularly gets into the mainstream media. It never particularly changes anything in Parliament. What's affected change in Parliament in the past is effectively the siphoning of votes off the main two parties. That's happened to a point that Reform is now the biggest party, and now everyone is trying to pivot right on immigration. Everyone is having to go to the two-tier justice system or trying to deny it even exists. And Rupert Lowe was part of that team, but he's not anymore, and, well, whenever anything is brought up in Parliament, or is brought up in the mainstream media and becomes a national conversation, largely it's Reform pushing it. I know a lot of normies that seem quite happy with Doge and the waste in council spending, for example. And by the way, they bring it up to me. I have never seen halal be brought up to me by a normie, even post Rupert Lowe. But anyway, our independent rape gang inquiry is the most successful crowdfunding effort in British political history, helping to force the government's hand on holding a national inquiry. Yeah, there was some pressure from that. And in less than 24 hours, our parliamentary petition to release Lucy Connolly received over 100,000 signatures. God, who cares about parliamentary? I've not signed one of those in about 3 years because it never leads to anything. But yes, fine, good. You have a lot of supporters. I understand that. And I've no doubt in my mind people will toss the 25 quid to you to become part of Restore UK. Forgive me for being quite sceptical on how successful this is going to be. I have seen too many things like this before be brought up and go nowhere in a year. Could this one be different? Yes. Do I think it will be different? No. Just think what we could achieve if we were doing that every week. We won't talk, we will do, we will act, we will deliver. Being a member will give you a real say in how the movement progresses and evolves. Direct democracy. I just wouldn't even bother. I wouldn't even bother with the direct democracy part, but I don't know why right-wingers like Lowe and Habib are going down this route. Right-wingers are not supposed to be massive fans of direct democracy. We kind of like hierarchy, and we like a leader that is just effectively telling us what direction we are going to go, follow or don't, it's up to you. I wonder if there's another political party that does that and gets complained at by these right-wingers. We must aim together to implement the Great Repeal Act 2029, fine. That can then be followed by the National Restoration. Your country, your responsibility. Let's restore Britain, Rupert. Again, the politics of this, the actual policy, is fine. I think this constant splintering is just absolutely moronic and won't take you anywhere. But anyway, as I said before, and feel free to tell me this is me being unfair, but I'm still going to say it anyway. If this was done by anyone else, I would assume it's a grift, but because Rupert Lowe's so rich, I don't see why he would be making this a grift. I basically think Rupert Lowe's looking more for social capital from the online right than any sort of money from them, but still, this is a bit of a strange sign-up process to me. Because on the Join Us page, I'm not going to exhaustively go through this, it effectively says if you agree with us, you will be able to pay 20 quid to have a platform shaped by the people, i.e. you, have community-driven trust, transparency and teamwork, okay, and a movement that will act and not just talk through campaigns, legal action, investigations and data. All stuff, again, that's pretty much already happening with other institutions, whether it be GB News on the data and investigation front, campaigns through, obviously, Reform UK being a big one, and also their members, but you've also got things like the Women's Safety Institution. Legal action, you've got things like the Free Speech Union. Okay, fair enough, that is just for free speech, but obviously you can have legal action to judicially review quite a few things. Again, these things aren't pointless. I'm more saying, why make your own thing when there are plenty of other institutions that could just directly have your support, whether that be through donations or working with them with your team, bringing them into Parliament and things like that, which to be fair he does do as well. But ultimately I just can't help but have the feeling at the back of my mind that, well, ultimately I just don't understand what the long-term aim of this actually is, other than doing what you're already doing, but having people paid to get involved with it. And you move over to the terms and conditions. What you get as a member for 20 quid is you're entitled to participate in the local and national activities, including campaigns, meetings and events. Okay. Vote on all Restore Britain policies shaping the direction of our movement, and receive communications about Restore Britain's campaigns, i.e. go on a mailing list. Which, again, I don't know any movement that says you have to pay for us to volunteer for us. Usually it's just, can we have some donations? It's not actually usually pay to be a member so you can campaign for us. Because usually it's funded by millionaires, these sorts of things, to fund the volunteers, because effectively they get free labour from them. Again, this is a quite odd way to go about it. But you may have also noticed if you want to spend the vast sum of £2,500, you can join the Cromwell Club. I am never going to get over the right-wing obsession with Cromwell, because as much of a good military tactician he made Britain a terrible place to live. He was so hated he was executed after death. So the Cromwell Club is designed to bring together individuals who are committed to restoring Britain. The club exists to support the movement's work, funding research, outreach and strategic campaigns. Members will receive a tie and lapel badge, and annual dinner will be held in London for members, as well as access to exclusive events throughout the year. All that for 2,500 quid. More than anything, what that money's actually for is just a big donation toward the thing that actually will take money, which is legal challenges and things like that. And if you want to throw money at that, that's fine with me. I wouldn't even dream of putting that much money toward this, I'm going to be honest. But if you want to go forward with this experiment for these 20 quid, you know, I'm not going to disparage you for that. All I am saying is that I have seen similar movements to this being started before by people who are probably just as popular as Rupert Lowe, and they end up crashing and burning. Now, does that happen every time? No, obviously not. Does that mean you shouldn't try at all? Not necessarily. Would I trust a man with the political instincts of a plank to be in charge of a movement like this? Absolutely not. But I know plenty of you disagree with me on things like that, so as I say, if you do go forward and actually join this, I'm not going to disparage you or mock you. I just have an incredible amount of questions about how well this is all going to work and where it's going to lead to, but that's just me being sceptical. Anyway, what Restore Britain is doing so far is effectively just posting some infographics to Twitter highlighting big numbers and terrible crimes. Again, all fine, I've got no problem with this policy. Pretty much everyone's for deporting illegal migrants and criminals. But again, the question has to be answered, how is this meaningfully different to Reform? How is it meaningfully different to Ben Habib's party and his pressure group GB PAC? And 3, if there is no reasonable difference, why are you getting people to pay for this when GB PAC is free and you can volunteer there? Again, there's this odd thing with Rupert Lowe. He may have put his money where his mouth is a few times. If he has, I don't know where. I know that he donates his MP salary and he makes sure everyone knows that on Twitter to a charity of his choosing once a month. That's fine, but I would say that is actually quite anti-Christian. The whole point of doing charity is that you don't boast about it. But leaving that to the side, I don't think many people would really care if he stopped doing that to then instead put his MP salary into things like this. And I mean, to be, you know, the man's a millionaire, as is Ben Habib. Why are they not putting their own money into this? Farage put his own money into Reform. Habib's pledging to put his own money into Restore. I have no doubt in my mind that... Sorry, I meant advance, but I have no doubt in my mind that Rupert Lowe's put money into Restore, but it then makes it very questionable as to why effectively he's asking for donations, because it's perfectly reasonable to suspect it's to try and get that money back. Not to necessarily make a profit, I'm not saying that, but make it so the financial pressure on Rupert Lowe is not as high as it would be for Ben Habib with his GB PAC. Which frankly just means that I have more respect for Ben Habib than Rupert Lowe. But anyway, other policy was posted like the burqa ban and net emigration. You know, policy that I agree with and have no problem with, but at the end of the day, how much more effective would all this have been if you just stuck to Reform and had pressure on the inside there? Answer, probably a hell of a lot more effective. And if you didn't get your way in there, guess what? You bide your time, you end up with people who probably will. For God's sake. Jeremy Corbyn supported Blairism for 30 years. Margaret Thatcher supported Ted Heath. Politics is an incredibly long game, and there are far too many people who want quick and easy answers. That's not how it works. This reform project has effectively been 30 years in the making. It's foolish to try and ankle bite it at the last hurdle, isn't it? Anyway, as mentioned before, Dan Wootton had one of his live shows yesterday, and he had both Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe on separately to talk about them launching their rivals to Reform and Farage. I think it's worth saying at this point, the reaction to both of these launches has been largely silence from Reform leadership, and basically everyone else who is a Reform activist is largely mocking this. And people who don't feel like they have a dog in this fight but are basically like, why are they trying to split the right even more? This seems ridiculous. But anyway, let's get into some of the clips. So Rupert Lowe's on first, and Dan's first question is, why are you and Ben launching two completely separate political movements on the same day? That seems like you're rivaling each other, rather than coming together, which basically everyone wants to rival Reform. So I'm not being funny. I've seen some people who have been heavily critical of Reform, essentially seeing the mess that was yesterday and saying, well, this is going nowhere, stick to Reform then. History Debunked probably being my biggest example of that, because ultimately his argument was, well, Rupert Lowe has more of a chance of being Prime Minister than Ben Habib, and he's not working with him at all anyway, and I think the chance of him becoming Prime Minister are basically nil. What's the point? We need to actually get something done within Parliament, obviously Reform are the closest to our positions and everything, so, go with them. Because yes, they do look like rivals, but this is what Rupert Lowe had to say on that.
Well, firstly, we're not at war, Dan.
Good.
Secondly, we are marching to our agenda, which was always planned. And Ben and I did discuss working together, but we had a philosophical difference of opinion. Ben wanted a party and I wanted a movement. And the essential difference between the two is that there are already a lot of parties out there. There isn't a unifying movement which accepts the fact that Britain has gone badly wrong and unifies people from all political parties in an attempt to bring common sense and logic to the way in which we're governed.
Yeah, that's because that's not possible. There's no way you're going to get people from all political parties to... I mean, you very well might get them to all agree on what the problem is, but that's still not happening. You're certainly not going to get them to agree on the solution. And this is what I mean by Rupert Lowe's political instincts are similar to that of a plank's. Are you expecting to actually head a movement that explicitly says we want small state plus no wokery and get people from the Green Party involved? No, obviously not. You're going to get right-wing Tories and Reform people agreeing with all of that. And guess what? They already exist in a movement. It's called Reform. And guess what? They are getting defectors from Tories, from Labour, from the Lib Dems. Because one thing I love to see from homosexuals is effectively, oh, look at all these people from all the different parties defected to Reform, just another uniparty. And then here's Rupert Lowe, their favourite politician, effectively saying, oh yeah, we basically need a uni-movement of every party. There seems to be very little consistency on these points, is what I'm saying.
Now, that doesn't mean to say that the movement won't either turn into a party, take over another party, or indeed play a part in another party.
The idea here being that I think a lot of people are expecting him to effectively take over the Tory party. That is just madness to think that that would happen. I'm on the side of they might let Rupert Lowe in, but he is having absolutely no influence in that party whatsoever because he'd basically disintegrate it, because most of the party is still effectively Lib Dems and he wants those people purged. But I think they're desperate enough to try anything over the next year. And if it's not that, then effectively, as I said, it's just Lowe being an independent and shutting out for Twitter. Great, glad he tried to undermine Reform for that. Anyway, Dan asks him then about his ambitions to become Prime Minister.
Dan, I didn't have an ambition to become the leader of Reform. I was doing my bit to promote what I thought was a path to a better way of government with Nigel, but for some reason they chose to politically assassinate me. So, well, I'm not being funny, but if that's what they tried to do, it did work. Ultimately, we know there's no way back for Lowe to reform because Nigel Farage would rather eat razor blades. And if he does join the Tories, either pretty much the same issue he had with Reform is going to happen. He's going to have to basically keep quiet about his more radical rhetoric, which obviously the online right absolutely love, or he is, this is never going to happen, or he does take over the party, purge it of 80% of the people, and the party basically collapses and dies. So he's stuck in political purgatory forever. Yeah, you did it to yourself as far as I'm concerned. I think people can see what I've been doing in a year in Parliament. I'm not the best thing since sliced bread, but all I do is stand up in Parliament and speak the truth. And I think people can see that.
Most of the time, certainly, sure. But I went through this whole thing before. What does that actually achieve? Answer, actually very little.
I'm not in this for money. I give my parliamentary salary to charity. I'm in this to change the way we're governed. I've probably got a lot less skeletons in my locker than Nigel.
I mean, if it's not obvious at this point, he's effectively skirting around the question. I don't think he has any interest in becoming Prime Minister. I don't even think he's got any interest in staying as a politician in 2029. As I say, I think he's basically shutting out for his Twitter audience. Which, if that's what you want to do, fine, but at the end of the day, that's a waste of time. But also, he's instantly asked about the skeletons in the closet comment.
So you say Nigel does have skeletons in his closet that could impact him
I
becoming
don't
Prime
know.
Minister?
I don't know. I'm not saying he has or he hasn't, Dan, but he'd find it difficult to have less skeletons in the closet than I have because I am what I appear to be.
Why even say it in the first place then? Oh, Nigel's a wrong-un, you know, he's a wrong-un. Well, go on then, give us details. Oh, I don't actually know anything. There was a guy I was arguing with on Twitter the other day who was a Lowe fan, and he started saying, oh, Reform said that he sexually assaulted his staff and smeared him, so I pushed him back on all this, and after a long back and forth, effectively what the guy said in the end is, oh, the details don't matter, I just instinctively believe Lowe. And my massive problem with this is that Lowe doesn't do details himself, will throw out things like this all the time and not substantiate them, and nobody seems to have a problem with this. Which I think is a pretty bad thing. I don't think you should just be throwing things like this out unsubstantiated. At least the things said by Reform MPs about Rupert Lowe were somewhat substantiated. Oh, we're worried about his behaviour because he has altercations in the chamber with Labour MPs. We have a KC report going into the bullying allegations, where even when Lowe found out what was going on, he directly said things like the WhatsApp messages were deplorable about the woman. Whereas Lowe here just throws out, yeah, Nigel probably has skeletons in the closet. Oh, does he? Can you give us an example? Nah. I've had a massive problem with homosexuals for quite some time, as you know. And things like this are not helping me change my mind, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, they go through the Reform so-called hit job, how it's disgusting according to Dan Wootton and all that. And Lowe's answer is basically, I'm not really interested in the Reform upper brass anymore, but anyone who's a member of Reform is free to join, effectively trying to sidestep the attacks on Reform so that, well, it doesn't look like he has much animosity to the membership, which is fine, but then he starts talking about Ben Habib again.
In answer to your previous question, I haven't fallen out with Ben at all. It was just an intellectual difference of opinion.
Got it.
He wanted a party, and I wanted a movement.
Can I?
Which again, I do not understand why you didn't join GB Pack. I do not understand why GB Pack isn't even being mentioned here, given that not only is it free, but it's pretty much planning to do the same thing as Restore Britain. As I say, this is either showing that they can't work together or they are both phenomenally stupid. Fracture and fracture and fracture and splinter and splinter and splinter. What good is it? None. I'm sticking with Reform, thanks. Anyway, he's then asked about Gemrick and his prospects of allying with him along with the Tories.
Look, I think, as I said, Restore Britain could become a party. It could form part of another party, or it could take over another party.
Yeah, I get it. It's a movement. I'm still not actually sure what the ambition is beyond make a vague sort of movement. This is equivalent, a massive equivalent that I criticise constantly with the left, where it's just, oh, we need to organise. The right-wing version of that is just, oh, we need to make a movement, create a movement. And again, I've seen it over and over again. It doesn't go anywhere. There seems to be two options when it comes to doing anything in politics that actually seem to succeed. One is obviously create a coherent political party that can actually get mass support and win councils and obviously seats in Parliament. The other option is to effectively become a think tank with a overarching single purpose. The IEA does very good because it is massively pushing economic efficiency and free markets. The Tony Blair Institute is good because all it does is push Blairism. But why are these think tanks very good? Because they are also directly associated with specific parties. The IEA was very much aligned with the Tories during the Thatcher years, obviously, things like that. And Lowe here has put the cart before the horse. It's more of a, oh, we'll make a vague movement and hope that we can align with someone someday. No, you kind of have to do the opposite of that. Find people within these movements that actually agree with you and then effectively join up with them. And if that's Robert Jenrick, fine, but say that. Don't give these vague generalities, because if that's genuinely the route you're going down, it's not going anywhere. So it happened with the Liberalists, it happened with the Wellington Project. Alright, they were small, this is backed by a millionaire, could be better. Well, it's happened with millionaires too. You know, bunch of the people who were very pro-Brexit and left Labour and Tories, for example, they tried to make Change UK and other think tanks, didn't go anywhere. Money does help with politics, but my god, having money in politics does not mean that you are going to be popular or get any power. It's way more complex than that. Anyway, he goes into more details about Restore Britain effectively trying to revive Thatcherism. Again, don't have much issue with this. In terms of policy, I just wish it was being done in a much more useful way. But I think that's enough of covering Lowe. Straight after this, Ben Habib came on.
I want the British people to evidence what I believe, which is that there is a need for a new political force, something that can deliver at the ballot box. I want them to evidence that what that my belief is correct by getting at least 30,000 members to sign up before we apply to the electoral party status.
And the reason I've chosen 30,000 members is because that was the number we had in Reform UK at the beginning of last year's general election.
Right, fine. If that's his self-imposed challenge, so be it. I'm up in the air on how possible that is, as I said before. He seems to be largely trying to advertise to the Tommy crowd. So he'll say it in a little bit, but he'll effectively say everyone is welcome to come and join the party. We don't ban anyone for anything, like Reform banned people for silly tweets in the past or things like that. Okay, whatever, fine, but he does mention Tommy Robinson by name. And the thing is that, as I said before, Tommy's team's mostly in UKIP at the moment. So why would they splinter off and bother joining this brand new party that isn't even a party yet? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not being funny, it does just really highlight how far Reform have come over the past year. Literally 200,000 extra members since Farage returned and led the party and steered the rudder, along with getting Zia Youssef in. Ben Habib left not long after that, obviously. And his alternative he's been building up for a year. It's been GB Pack. Not exactly sure what they actually do. I know they keep saying they've got names on board, but I'm yet to see anything come to fruition. These things can take time, though. And now he's got a party that he's only going to bother actually registering if he can get the direct support. Fine, I suppose, but as I say, the general reaction to this was, why would I bother? I already have 10 other options to choose from, and there's only one that's actually getting anywhere.
And with that number, I know you can mount campaigns across the country, therefore. It's obviously, we would like bigger, but it's enough to become a viable political force.
That's certainly true. The Green Party ended up on about 30,000 members in 2014, and to be honest with you, that was 4 years after Caroline Lucas became an MP for Brighton Pavilion. And there's no doubt that the Greens are a national force at this point. But the problem is, once again, is that this all looks like ankle biting. You know, all these people seem to agree that 2029 is the time we need to actually have a political force that is representing the right. And well, when it comes to the problems with Farage, with Rupert Lowe, obviously it was all down to semantics, given Reform does want to deport all criminals and illegal aliens, and is looking to get at the very maximum net to zero immigration in place. And with Ben Habib, it's really niche stuff that nobody really cares about. And obviously Ben's also asked about the splitting of the right from this, because this is a lot more direct, given it's an actual party.
So, just if you don't mind me contradicting you in the use of the word right.
Yes, you don't like that, do you?
I loathe the use of the word because it masks what's really going on in politics.
Oh, yeah, but basically everyone agrees with that, fine. But why are you making a new party and undermining an ankle-biting Reform? Please answer that question. He goes on a big diatribe about the difference between internationalists and nationalists, etc., to go on to say this about Reform.
Reform UK offered, I think, the hope from breaking from that, but as you know, Dan, I'm very critical of the approach taken by Reform UK, taking on board multiple characters from Labour, from the Liberal Democrats,
Yes.
putting Charlie Mullins forward as a candidate, lots of former Tory One Nation West.
I mean, half of that stuff's just nonsense, by the way. The Charlie Mullins thing was Charlie Mullins misunderstanding what a mailing list is. They haven't put him forward as a candidate at all. They just said in an email, please apply to be a candidate. It was sent to everyone, just signed off by Nigel Farage, so he's not been put forward as a candidate at all. Secondly, he'll say claiming left and right don't exist anymore, while at the same time criticising them for taking people from left-wing parties on. Okay, you can say they're internationalists, sure, but there's very much a dividing line between Reform being nationalist and all the other parties largely being internationalist. And I mean, where were these people supposed to go? There wasn't really a proper nationalist party. Obviously, Tories was about as close as you got, but they betrayed us over and over again. So we're going with someone we don't think is going to betray us this time around.
So
Reform
Advance UK isn't
yeah.
a party of the left, though.
No, it's not a party of the left, but it's a party that is fundamentally pro-British.
Is that a bad thing now?
And you might think, well, that's a given. You know, why is that such an extraordinary thing? The reason it's extraordinary is that actually there isn't a party that is fundamentally pro-British. Even Farage, let's take Farage, whose persona exudes Britishness. Farage is on the record saying a united Ireland is inevitable.
Yeah, Farage did say that it'll happen one day, but not anytime soon, which to me indicates he's expecting it to happen basically after he dies. I don't think that necessarily means that he's just going to let Republic of Ireland take Northern Ireland without a fight. But, I mean, this is what I mean about the purity testing and the niche problems. I talk to people who are from Northern Ireland who are fans of Farage and were even in UKIP and are part of Reform now. There is no impression in Northern Ireland that Nigel Farage is going to give them to the Republic. As I say, it's a very niche problem that nobody thinks is a problem. Anyway, they move on to the idea that Nigel Farage is containment, and openly so. Believe it or not, I'm for this because, as people have probably noticed over the past few years, I have a massive problem with areas of the right that I absolutely do think need to be gatekept. So thank you, Farage, for doing that job.
I believe that Nigel Farage has always basically been a closet Tory, desiring to be taken back into the mainstream.
I still think this is one of the most crazy things you can say about Nigel Farage. You cannot look at what he's done over the past 20 years, let alone the past year, and think he wants to in any way have anything to do with the Tory party or the mainstream, beyond trying to advertise himself for votes. I mean, for God's sake, Fraser Nelson just did a whole documentary on him, and half the time he spent trying to say, why are you being racist about Anna Sawar in Scotland? Appealing to a massive side of the voting base, which is the middle class, means, yeah, being a bit cringe. It means Cheshire Housewives nationalism. It means being on board with the kitsch aesthetics, the very Love Island looking welcome to the party post they do on Twitter. And then when it comes to policy, I mean, ultimately, they're still pushing to deport all illegal immigrants. They are still pushing to deport criminals, who are foreign, obviously. They're pushing for net zero immigration. They are the party of the, what I guess you could call the modern working class. They call it the alarm clock class. The people who get up, go to work, go home and watch Love Island. They're trying to appeal to the Dino and at the same time appeal to Greg the Sparky. These aren't people that particularly care about United Ireland, unless they're in Ireland obviously, but even then with this niche issue, nobody's under the impression that it's going anywhere, which makes the idea of this new party even more moronic. But in appealing to this massive normie base, yeah, to some extent it might look like containment. It's going to the online right because it's full of weirdos.
For me, it's always, when I look at Farage, I see a man who's only really interested in his own self-promotion. A lot of people watching this show will disagree with that, but that's what I see. Essentially a narcissist with self-promotion at the heart of whatever philosophy he has.
Again, it's something that's not just been said by me but a few other people, but this all just looks like pure projection. Again, you look at a man who didn't have as much of an ego, Dr. David Bull, in the same position as Ben Habib, wasn't an idiot about it, didn't leave the party in a strop, and where is he now? Chairman, and largely energising the party. That could have been you, Mr. Habib, but no, you went off to create your own damn thing.
He doesn't have what I would call a coherent political philosophy. The fact that he describes someone like Tommy Robinson as being alt-right, serial criminal, anyone who supports Tommy Robinson should be ostracized.
Well, they've definitely never been on board with that last one because there are Tommy Robinson fans in Reform, but okay. I mean, let's be real here. Tommy Robinson is a serial criminal. And let's be real here, he's also been part of political parties before and he's killed them. So yeah, I'm not particularly shocked that he's gatekept.
I mean, this is not the language of someone who's thinking straight, because whatever Tommy Robinson might be as an individual, the fact is he has made arguments which we all now see to have been true for many, many years.
Okay, that's fine and everything, but if he turns out, as has been made example in the past with UKIP, to be terrible for electoral politics, you're obviously going to gatekeep him out of an electoral party. Unless, of course, you're Ben Habib or UKIP.
And before Farage starts condemning the man as a serial criminal, he should take the straw out of his own, or the plank, I should say, out of his own eye. There's a gentleman called George Cottrell, who's never more than 5 yards from Farage, who's a convicted felon.
I mean, I don't know the details of this guy, but if he's a convicted felon singular, that implies to me that was one crime. I mean, to be fair here, we called Tommy Robinson a serial criminal, which is true. And also James McMurdoch, obviously, he's a felon as well, and he's still accepted by the party and is still an MP, so it doesn't seem all that hypocritical to me. Again, at the end of the day, the reason that Tommy Robinson is kept well away from Reform is because he would be absolutely terrible for their electoral prospects. Call it unprincipled, call it what you like. At the end of the day, if he's not going to help you win against Labour and the Tories, what's the point?
And Farage gets on his high horse and condemns Tommy Robinson without recognising the phenomenal work that Tommy Robinson has done.
Right, he said on GB News that in the past Tommy Robinson has done work exposing grooming gangs, so that's not even true. But I'm just so bored of talking about Tommy Robinson now. Come on, get to your point.
We've got to be brave and speak fearlessly. And so what I've said is, well, what the Constitution says is that there are only 3 requirements to become a member of the party. You've got to be a British citizen on the electoral roll and not a member of another party. Beyond that, we are not going to be policing our members. We're not going to be approving our members. They don't have to jump any hurdles as they do in Reform UK to be acceptable.
I mean, as far as I'm aware, Reform UK don't actually vet their members, they do vet their candidates though, which is just obviously sensible. Why would you not vet your candidates? Why would you not vet the people who are supposed to be largely and publicly actually representing you? Obviously you should vet them. But then when it comes to people being kicked out of the party or not being allowed, yeah, some high profile people obviously should be banned from it. And I've been one of the people who's been perfectly fine with Tommy Robinson being banned from it because, frankly, while he may guarantee you a core vote of a few, I don't know, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, you lose millions. It's just cost-benefit analysis, basic electoral politics. Why would you let him in? But obviously Ben Habib's open to him joining. Is he going to join? Are his core fans going to join? I don't know. I highly doubt it because UKIP seems to be the party that his team are in anyway. Anyway, I'm really bored of talking about Robinson now. What else do you have to say?
We're going to have a college,
Yes.
which is going to be the intellectual ballast, if you like, of the party, numbering up to 100 people. They, along with the executive, will determine our policies and determine which candidates come forward.
Yeah, and you're very democratic, and there's a real contrast there between how Reform UK do things.
What do you mean it's different how Reform UK do things? They still vet candidates. You're going to have 100 people going through each candidate to vet them. You mad? Too many cooks spoil the broth is something that always comes to mind and is one of the biggest criticisms of democracy. Ultimately, as I said before, I don't see how this is largely different to the Democratic Socialists of America conventions. So what happens when you end up just having democracy like this? Why do the 2 main parties work so well and have worked well for such a large amount of time? Because largely, they are parties that say, these are our policies now, come and support them. And yeah, they've worked like that for hundreds of years. There's this really weird new outlook that's incredibly left-wing coded when it comes to Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib, where effectively it's, oh, here are our plans that we hope we will be working towards, but at the end of the day, we want it to be completely democratic and via complete consent and will of the people. Okay, but the thing is, if you just make your principles and your policies very obvious to people, they will come to you anyway, which in and of itself is consent. And that's a much more right-wing and hierarchical way of looking at it, and wow, tends to work a hell of a lot better. But for some reason, Lowe and Habib, while they have very similar ideas on, oh, we should make all institutions democratic, I don't see how it's any different to citizens' assemblies that the Green Party and Labour Left have been pushing for years at this point. It's a really weird direction for right-wingers to go, and I don't get why there's not much criticism about it. Anyway, Ben's then directly asked if there's a revenge aspect to this.
No, not at all. I can swear, cross my heart, hope to die, there isn't a bitter bone in my body that's motivating me to launch Advance UK. Of course, at a personal level, I'm not wholly gratified by hearing what Farage has to say about me. All of it is false, by the way, and I can address each accusation he makes. I suppose the only accusation I would accept that he makes is that I am insignificant. It's not about me. It is about the British people.
I'm actually really bored of hearing the will of the British people. I never thought I'd say that. Like, yeah, I get that, but ultimately, political parties are completely in the right to have their leaders dictate to their membership what the party is all about and what their policies are, and then it's up to the members to decide if they want to stay or go. If you want to try at this democracy route, fine, but all I'm saying is that the Greens are the only other party that tries to do this.
We've got to reacquaint ourselves with the notion that we on the political landscape are merely the servants of the people. We are all insignificant. The only thing that matters is the collective body of the British people. They are who we serve. And the fact that Farage thinks that I'm insignificant infers that he isn't. And he sees himself as being hugely significant. And
yeah, I'm not being funny, but when you're a public servant, you're obviously a very significant person if you're the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Home Secretary, whatever. Obviously, you have to be significant. You've got people voting for you, for God's sake. I kind of get the point he's trying to make. Oh, we're supposed to be insignificant. We're supposed to be serving the people. But even way back when in the 1800s, when the state was very small and did not impose on the British people as it does in today's world, people still knew who Disraeli and Gladstone were. They were still pretty much celebrities. So let's just be realistic about this. You obviously need to be significant to be successful in politics. This is just a virtue signal, to be honest.
Or by any bitterness. I'm motivated by the fact that Farage simply is incapable of saving this country. He's not, Dan, he can't define the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
I have literally no idea what he means by that. Does he mean because he said once that a united Ireland is probably coming at some point in the far future? Maybe. That doesn't mean he doesn't think that Northern Ireland is part of the democratic unit. Nigel Farage currently coming top of the polls absolutely everywhere, and we have Ben Habib saying he is not the person to do it. Are you mad? Oh, Boris betrayed us though. Yeah, well, Nigel Farage has been saying the same thing for 30 years. Boris Johnson didn't. Boris Johnson was fraternising with the Tory party, who was happy to betray us over and over, and obviously he was the biggest betrayer of all. Including, by the way, Nigel. Nigel was one of the main people, in fact, betrayed by Boris Johnson. I have high doubts he's going to do it again. Is it possible? Yeah, sure. But I'm obviously going to put more of my trust into him, who's actually, winning elections, than Ben Habib here, who may be way more pure, but can't really get anywhere.
He hasn't got any democracy in his own party. Members are not members, they're subscribed. All the things for which he should stand, he actually fails on.
Yeah, stuff like this doesn't help the bitterness either. Again, really niche stuff that nobody seems to really care about. There's 230,000 members of Reform. How many of them do you think they really care about voting for the Reform policy platform? They literally joined Reform for its policy platform that it's largely kept to. Come on, man, just give me a break here. Anyway, Ben's finally asked about Rupert Lowe.
I wanted Rupert Lowe to lead our party. I did not want to be leader, but Rupert and I have been talking about the launch of a new party, and he was behind it since our first discussions back in March.
Yes, obviously that'll be just after he was kicked out of Reform.
What's happened here is that Rupert Lowe has been chastened by the whole party political scene, and I think he was really focused, understandably, on clearing his name against those horrible charges brought by Zair Youssef.
Which, yes, the CPS are not charging him, fine. And, realistically, my take on this is that I don't think Rupert Lowe really has any interest in staying as a politician after this parliament. As I said earlier, I think his main interest is chudding out for his Twitter audience. And obviously, to be fair, he does good work with his constituency. I'm not going to disparage him for that. But to be honest with you, if I'm wrong on that one, the alternative is that he's probably going to be joining the Tories. I don't think he'd bother standing again as a independent MP. And to be honest, joining the Tories at this point, especially with Great Yarmouth, yeah, he's he is not going to be winning that election, I think. Because the Tory brand is way too toxic. Far too toxic for him to win on his individual name alone.
His position changed slightly from wanting to, or having agreed in principle to leading Advance UK, or whatever name it would have adopted. Back then, the name was also up in debate. His position changed from wanting to be in a political party and running a political party to doing a movement where he sees greater traction from a cross-party approach.
Which again is absolutely mad to me, because when you were having these conversations, assuming you were, and I don't know why they wouldn't, why would GB Pack not be brought up? It's making no sense to me. As I say, there's a few possibilities of what's happened here, and all of them reflect terribly on these people. Either, because he goes into how they're philosophically aligned, great, but if you can't work together, what's the point? So either they've had these talks and realised they can't work together, terrible. Again, feeds into my thought process that these two are the problem, not Farage. They can't negotiate for toffee and cannot come to mutual understandings with other people, which is slightly less bad but similar to the last assumption, which is that they just hate each other. which I don't even necessarily think they do, or they agreed to do all this, agreed amicably to split these resources, in which case, again, their political instincts are just terrible. There's no reality where what happened yesterday is a good thing. Again, as I say, to people who don't even really concentrate on this stuff, they were like, what the hell's going on? I don't know. This is making reform look like the pinnacle of competence, to be quite frank.
For you coming together in the
Rupert can
future?
join. Rupert can join today, tomorrow, whenever he likes, subject to due process within the party. He can join at the senior most level in the party. Absolutely, most welcome.
And then
Ben's obviously also all over the place with how the party works. Oh, we'll have a senior college, they'll be elected in, they'll decide who can go where, they'll select the candidates that way. Oh, by the way, I'm going to appoint myself leader, I'd appoint Rupert as leader. Oh, what happened to all this due process at the same time? Hang on. It's all over the place, and I just don't understand the messaging. But, well, I mean, this might be the only video I do on this, because he might never make it to 30,000 members anyway. We'll have to see. Anyway, the Lawrence Fox thing's brought up as well, and weirdly, again, this is what Ben had to say on this.
Well, I wasn't aware that the offer stood on an unconditional basis, that I could just take it over and put in this constitution. I wasn't aware of that. I had some discussions with Lawrence, obviously over the last few years, and I had an exchange of correspondence with Lawrence this morning when he heard about Advance UK. But there's no animosity whatsoever between Lawrence and myself.
Yeah, again, this is just another thing that doesn't make sense to me. We were in talks the whole time, but we're just not working together. I didn't even realise that was an offer. Either these people can't work together, or they are too stupid to work together. Both of those are terrible situations, and also make them terrible politicians. Anyway, that'll do it for the Dan Wootton sector. I am very aware that this is going on quite a while, so I will speed up. Rupert Lowe today has been very happy that they have 70,000 X followers in just 24 hours, partially because Rupert Lowe has a very large X following, partially because Elon Musk obviously replied and retweeted him as well, so obviously they've got an awful lot of followers from that. How many exactly are people actually in Britain? Don't entirely know. There's obviously a lot of Americans who like Rupert Lowe for the fact that Elon Musk likes him, for the fact load seaters talk about him, etc, etc, etc. You don't know, so the more important side of this, I would argue, is how many people actually join and become members, which, could be thousands. I don't know. And we'll see where it goes from there. But as I say, I've seen movements like this being started up before, and from first principles of basically making the whole thing democratic, tends to be the worst way to do it. Ben Habib was also happy to announce that while his target was 30,000 members, they apparently have already made 5,000 members, which by the way is half of the following at Advance UK. That's an incredibly high uptick rate. A rate, I'm just going to be honest with you, a rate I am quite sceptical about, but who knows. Followers of Ben do like him very much, so maybe he just is that popular with his own following. But I will say on the other hand, that has absolutely blown Homeland out of the water, so we'll have to see how it goes. Obviously Elon Musk also supported Ben Habib. You might be wondering why Elon Musk has moved away from direct support of Reform UK over to Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe. Basically what it comes down to is Tommy Robinson. It's literally little more than that. Because Elon Musk is on the side of Tommy Robinson didn't do nothing, which, well, the story's a bit more complicated than that. Though just to wrap all this up, I will say that Ben Habib is slightly sniping Rupert Lowe, as he retweeted and replied to this tweet. If you don't want to pay a fee to post a policy, you can do it for free over at policyplatform.co.uk, as no membership is required. Policies are discussed, voted and fed into the work of Great British PAC, or anyone else who wants to take them on, because it's public, open, transparent and free, as any mass movement policy tool should be. And Ben Habib replies saying, Great British PAC is great. So while there's this public face from both of them of saying there's no animosity whatsoever, there's sniping going on over on Twitter, and it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever for Rupert Lowe to make his own mass movement without Ben Habib, unless, and the only way I can see there's no animosity, unless Rupert Lowe didn't want to put too much of his money into it, and so wanted it to be a membership scheme. I don't see any other reason for this. It's literally either they have fallen out and can't work together, or they haven't, and Rupert Lowe just doesn't want to put too much money into his projects. Which I actually don't have a massive problem with. If you've got a following and can get them to mobilise their own capital, fair enough. But as I say, it does make me respect Ben Habib a hell of a lot more. Anyway, to finish off, I will mention that I have seen absolutely no mention of either of this in the mainstream media, which does make sense because both their audiences pretty much exclusively alternative media. The only place I did see it was over on GB News, directly asking Sarah Pochin about this Ben Habib party, and her reaction is about what I would expect.
There we are, Advance UK, new kid on the block. What's your reaction to it?
White noise. You know, I'm sorry, there is only one party now that is the real opposition, and that is Reform UK. Yeah, Ben can do this. I mean, who's Ben Habib, for goodness sake? I've never even met the guy. The British public know that to be a force in politics now, which Reform are, you need to have the courage of these convictions, you need to have a leader like Nigel Farage, and they know that we will form the next government. So, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, just a largely who, what and why. I'll tell you what, I don't really care. Largely where I am. I mean, I know what the argument's going to be. Why have I just spent an hour and 20 minutes talking about them? Well, largely because my channel's kind of morphed into watching a bit of the decline of areas of the online right. Because, to be honest, there's areas of the online right that are doing quite well. Drupka Cunley, for example, Max Tempers, both ex-accounts that are doing, well, rather a lot. We're mainstreaming the Boris wave because of both. Motability cards have been talked about more than any time in history because of Max Tempers. Obviously a few other accounts that I respect are doing similar work as well. But pretty much everyone who turned their back on Reform, fully followed Ben Habib or Rupert Lowe, you know, more power to you, I guess. You're free to do what you want, but I just always thought it was a stupid idea. And now we've come to a point where they're not even working together. What is going on? Your alternative to Reform, sir. One of them is a party that sounds like it's going to be a democratic mess and won't be able to move anywhere. The other at the moment's a glorified mailing list, but to be fair, could turn into some things useful with their judicial reviews, legal action, and hell, even their data collection can be useful. But ultimately, how are either of these movements any different to Reform? Reform has a legal team. It has a load of KCs working with them for free. Reform, I do believe, does send out FOIs and does its own data collection. Reform has done legal action in the past with the Manchester airport attackers, for example. They're being charged by the CPS now because Reform were threatening to do it privately. You know, okay, they're probably not doing as much as you would like. They're probably not focusing their efforts on your particular priorities. Well, at the same time as all this, they're trying to win national elections. They're trying to win local elections. They're trying to be respected in Wales and Scotland, which, by the way, is working out quite well. So, as I've said in the past, Reform is still a plane that lifted off from the runway and flew quite high, yet it is still in the process of actually being built. And that is still an ongoing process, so of course it's not going to be perfect, but I do not understand this whole notion of trying to make perfect the enemy of good, when perfect doesn't even really get you anywhere. Maybe these two things will get you somewhere, I don't know, but as I've seen in the past, from similar movements, it doesn't get you anywhere. The Farage project was 30 years in the making. There is nothing else like it in British politics at the moment. And it's the reason we're seeing a very large-scale, slow-motion earthquake in British politics going on. As much as you might like Rupert Lowe and like Ben Habib, ultimately, the only reason Rupert Lowe's in Parliament and the main reason anyone knows Ben Habib is because they rode on the coattails of Nigel Farage. And that would be fine if they didn't pretend otherwise and embarrass themselves in the process of trying to prove otherwise, but hey, here we are. People think I'm too harsh on these people, but given the embarrassment of their launches yesterday, okay, yes, they have an awful lot of ex-followers, but to basically everyone else in the political sphere, it just looks like a total mess. And even got very critical people of Reform, like History Debunked, to effectively say, just put your effort behind Reform, does not really show that it was a successful launch, but as I say, here we are. Right, I think I've talked enough today. It's another long one, so let's get to shilling. Tonight, Tosh Talks, we're talking about how the Tory party are doomed, going through a Spectator article, so do look forward to that. Some article on Thursday, do look forward to that. Videos out as and when I can make them. And then moving over to direct shilling, obviously subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, great ways to help out the channel. Do become a member, do leave super chats, super thanks, great ways to help out the channel, and I do obviously appreciate every single donation. Right, I think with that, that's everything I had for you for today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.